OPEC has functioned as the textbook cartel. The 14 members of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries produce 40% of the oil used every day, giving the group strong influence over oil prices and the global economy, like a championship boxer who has dominated in the ring for decades. In its more than half a century existence, OPEC has fought off challenges from new technologies and competition from petroleum discoveries outside its members' domains. But the group is really up against the ropes now, as the U.S. produces record supplies of fracked shale oil and the planet begins to embrace renewable energy. To stave off the competition and boost prices, OPEC has cut output. This strategy has succeeded in the past, but will it work now? Here's the situation. Production cuts by OPEC and its allies gave prices a quick boost when they were agreed upon in November 2016, but it didn't last. The real question is whether OPEC can prop up prices when the U.S. continues to increase production by fracking deposits of shale oil. Here's the argument. OPEC's agreement to cut output includes several non-member countries, which should help it regain control over crude oil and prices. Some forecasts suggest oil consumption will continue to rise in the next 20 years, which seemingly would benefit OPEC and its allies. It's unclear how OPEC's strategy will play out. Even though oil has risen steadily since June 2017, analysts are divided over whether the cartel will finally succeed in eliminating the supply glut that has depressed crude prices for several years. Plus, with increased innovation in renewable energy, oil consumption may peak sooner than expected. That could leave OPEC knocked down with no chance of getting back up.
OPEC stands for the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. It was formed in 1960 by founding members Iraq, Kuwait, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela. The group was created to monitor the stability and prices of the petroleum market, which was previously determined by US-dominated multinational oil companies. Currently, OPEC member countries also include Algeria, Angola, Ecuador, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Libya, Nigeria, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Today, these oil-producing member countries supply over 40% of the world's crude oil production, and together they control more than 80% of the world's proven discover harder to extract oil. Because they weren't bound by the cartel's decisions, these countries have grown their levels of supply, which meant OPEC's market influence began to decline. A rise in supply and a reduced demand for oil in Europe and Asia led to the price of oil crashing. This recently hit a record high and are predicted to surpass both Saudi Arabia and Russia. But even with higher output levels, the US still imports roughly 300 million barrels of oil a month.
Prices. Some forecasts suggest oil consumption will continue to rise in the next 20 years, which seemingly would benefit OPEC and its allies. It's unclear how.
The reason? 1960 was a time of a globalizing oil market. Demand was growing, but oil-producing countries weren't the ones benefiting. Global production and price was controlled by 7 Western oil companies. That's where OPEC came in. Its goal was to give power back to the nations who had the oil the world desperately wanted. Their plan was to regulate supply and to manipulate prices. In other words, become a cartel. Member countries meet every 2 years to set production quotas. The lower the quotas, the higher the price for oil-consuming countries. In its early days, OPEC did not have a lot of influence on prices. But in 1973, OPEC introduced an oil embargo. The crude price quadrupled. Some countries were forced to ration gasoline. At the time, OPEC accounted for about half of global oil supply. OPEC lost some influence in the 1980s. High oil prices meant people were switching to alternative fuel, non-OPEC production increased, and a global recession saw demand for oil decrease. By 1986, the price crashed. Over the next 3 decades, the price of oil continued to fluctuate for a number of different reasons, despite OPEC's attempts to...
Là một vấn đề lớn. Trong 20 năm theo dõi OPEC, tôi chưa hề chứng kiến sự kiện nào như vậy. Đây là một sự rạn nứt mang tính biểu tượng cho tương lai của tổ chức 60 năm tuổi này.
Nếu như trong quá khứ, cứ hễ giá dầu giảm, OPEC liền họp lại để siết chặt bơm. Nguồn cung giảm, dầu lập tức lên giá. OPEC lại ung dung thu về hàng tỷ đô la. Tuy nhiên, trong kỷ nguyên hậu dầu mỏ hiện nay, chính OPEC cũng phải thừa nhận rằng quyền kiểm soát trên thị trường vàng đen không còn do mình chi phối.